Okay, so good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone today as we continue our journey through the Jewish year. I wanted to spend some time today getting us in the mood for the high holidays and talking mainly about Selichot. These prayers of repentance, of asking for forgiveness, that in Ashkenazi tradition began just this past Saturday night, 2 nights ago. So I just wanted to talk about that for some time, and then we'll see how much time we have left if we'll start talking about Rosh Hashanah. So my go-to place to remind me of some intricacies about holiday and traditions is no longer any of these books behind me or around me in my office, but rather online, a resource called My Jewish Learning. That's really a great resource. And as someone who loves books, I hate to say that really, if you want to have any tab bookmarked on your web browser, My Jewish Learning is a good one to have, because it has articles about every Jewish topic imaginable. And for every Torah portion, there is a summary of that week's Torah reading, of the Haftarah, and at least 15 sample Divrei Torah that span the Jewish religious spectrum, from those in Orthodox to those in the very liberal Jewish community, and everyone in between are represented in Divrei Torah. So My Jewish Learning, all as one word, no spaces between them, myjewishlearning.com, a great resource. And it just turns out that if you go to My Jewish Learning Selichot, you come up with an article by the late Rabbi Reuven Hammer, who's written a number of books about Jewish prayer, and like this one, Entering Jewish Prayer, and which is a great resource for I'm just looking for other books of his on my shelf. Don't have them handy right here, but so that's a great book. Entering Jewish Prayer is a great resource for understanding all of Jewish liturgy. He also wrote the commentary to the Sim Shalom prayer book, a separate volume called Or Chadash, which I have on my shelf, but I won't get it now. I wrote a book about Rabbi Akiva. That's one of his the last books that he wrote. So a prolific author to provide resources for everyone in the Jewish community to have access to Jewish sources. So there's a brief article that was summarized from Hammer's book, Entering the High Holidays, that explains what Selichot is. So Selichot, again, the word slicha in modern Hebrew is, you use it to say, excuse me. You bump into somebody on the street, and not all Israelis will say slicha if they bump into you, just the Israeli temperament. So you can tell if it's a tourist who bumps into you in Israel, then they're the ones who would say slicha. But that's just the generic term today for excuse me. But slicha is a word that goes all the way back to the Torah, asking for forgiveness. And so the prayers themselves, Hammer points out, as a unit, as a block of prayers in which we focus our attention on asking for forgiveness, first began to be associated with fast days. Now, in the time of the rabbis, now let me step back one sec. Fast days. When we think of fast days, we think of Yom Kippur. That's number one. We might think of Tisha B'Av, the summertime fast day, marking the destruction of both temples in Jerusalem. We might know of minor fast days on the calendar related to other historical events associated with the destruction of Jerusalem or the exile to Babylonia. So the day after Rosh Hashanah, the 3rd of Tishrei, is a fast day, the fast of Gedalia, to mark the assassination of the last Jewish leader in Israel by the Babylonians. So that's the fast of Gedalia. There's the 10th of Tevet, just a few days after Hanukkah, which marks the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem. There's the fast of Esther, where in the book of Esther, Esther asks Mordechai to ask the Jewish community to pray and fast for her for 3 days before she approaches Achashverosh to save the Jews from Haman's decree. And there is the fast of the firstborn on the day of the Seder, to remember the 10th plague in Egypt. There's the 17th of Tammuz, which marks the breaking of the siege, and 3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, before the 9th of Av, when the temple was destroyed. So we have those minor fast days on the calendar, but in the time of the rabbis, other fast days would be added to be determined by the rabbis in times of drought or in times of other distress facing the Jewish community. So the rabbis living in Israel, understanding that the agricultural system, the agricultural economy of Israel was based on rainfall only, because Israel does not have rivers like the Nile in Egypt that can provide a constant source of water year-round with its irrigation canals that come off of it. If you just look at a map of a satellite image of Egypt, it's clear. You can see the Nile from hundreds and thousands of miles away in outer space because of that narrow strip of fertile territory on either side of the Nile, and desert right beyond that. And in Israel, you see fertile ground in Israel in satellite images, but those are based on the whole water system from the Sea of Galilee, from the Kinneret, and sprinklers. So Israel is still dependent upon the Kinneret for water. They have desalination plants to help with the Mediterranean seawater to provide water for farmers today. But in the time of the rabbis, it was rainfall. And if the rain wasn't coming, and it still wasn't coming, then the rabbis would declare a fast day. And depending on whether it started to rain or not, there could be a series of fast days that the rabbis would institute. And there would be a series of penitential forgiveness prayers that would be recited that serve as the basis for future prayers of forgiveness. So the main thing that would be focused on in these prayers of forgiveness is something called, what is called in Hebrew, the 13 attributes of God. We're familiar with this from the Torah service for festivals, in which we sing 3 times in a row, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet. Okay, so we're familiar with that tune from the Torah service again for holidays and also for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, singing that 3 times to emphasize that these are attributes of God that we're focusing on, when we refer to God as Adonai, as opposed to Elohim, right? So when we say a prayer, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, right? So the two most common names of God, Adonai and Elohim, found in the Torah. For the rabbis, they represent 2 distinct aspects of what God represents. Is God merciful, or is God a God of justice? And justice doesn't always imply mercy, and mercy doesn't always imply justice. Together, the rabbis create a system in which we try to invoke God's mercy and compassion whenever we pray to God. And that we are afraid of God's justice, because the justice is based on a black and white understanding of God's determining how we get punished or rewarded for our actions. God has a list, and it's simple. If our positive actions outweigh or outnumber the negative actions that we have done, then very simple, God's attribute of justice works in our favor. But if our negative actions outnumber our positive actions, then we're in for it. And if God were only a God of justice, then we'd be punished because our list of bad actions outnumber our positive actions. And therefore, we need a God to be merciful to us, to understand that God's listening to our prayers of forgiveness, that we are truly repenting of our actions, and that God, despite the list, our list being longer on the bad side, God will still be merciful to us. And so whenever God's name appears in the Torah as Adonai, whether printed in our prayer books as a double Yud or the Yud Hey Vav Hey, whenever God's name is Adonai, the rabbis understand that as asking for mercy. So this verse from the book of Exodus, from the part of the story in which Moses is asking for forgiveness for the people after they worship the golden calf, Moses relates this verse that God is a God, an El, that is Rahum Vechanun, that is merciful and gracious. Erech Apayim, the English translation here in this Selichot service booklet says abounding in kindness, v'rav chesed. So it's not all the words are fully translated. So patient, Erech Apayim is very patient. It has been translated that way. V'rav chesed, abounding in compassion. Ve'emet, and is truthful or faithful. Notzer chesed la'alafim, he creates compassion for thousands of people. Nosei avon va'fesha, he is forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and granting pardon. Venake. Nosei avon va'fesha v'chata'a venake. So if you count up all those adjectives of God, then there are 13 of them there. And that is the understanding that those are the 13 attributes of God. So if we're going to ask for forgiveness, according to the rabbis, you want to refer to verses from the Torah to do that. And that is the main verse that is associated with prayers for forgiveness and is associated with the Selichot service. So Selichot began, Rabbi Hammer points out, for fast days that were instituted by the rabbis. And then once the rabbis came up with the understanding that there is a holiday known as Rosh Hashanah, they said that we prepare for Rosh Hashanah by reciting prayers of forgiveness days before the holiday. Okay, so now let me unpack that statement, what I said, that the rabbis came up with Rosh Hashanah. So in the Torah, there is no holiday of Rosh Hashanah. Absolutely not. In the Torah, the year is counted from the month of Passover. That is considered the first month of the year. We're told the Jews left in the first month, and then in the third month, they arrived at Mount Sinai. Okay, so that's the month of Shavuot, the third month. So there's later on, the names were added to the names of the months. So Nisan is the name of the first month. Iyar is the second month. Sivan is the third month. And then in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus, which goes in order throughout the year of the sacred occasions to be observed, Passover is first, right? Passover is first, then Shavuot is next, or Chag HaBikurim, the holiday of the first fruits, which are also associated with the holiday of Shavuot. Then the next holiday is the first day of the seventh month. So 7 in the Torah is a special number. It's a holy number. Right? God rested on the seventh day of creation. The eighth day after the baby boy is born is the day for the bris, because the boy survived the first 7 days of his life, and you mark that occasion on the eighth day by entering the boy into the covenant, right? So 7 is a special holy number in the Torah. So the first day of the seventh month would be a sacred occasion, a day to blow the shofar to mark that occasion. And then the 10th day of the seventh month is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. So Leviticus talks about it there in that list of sacred occasions. And chapter 16 of Leviticus has the whole ceremony of the sacrifices offered, the goat that is sent off to Azazel, etc., for Yom Kippur. And then Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret are mentioned. That's it for the sacred occasion. So no Rosh Hashanah as we know it. It's the first day of the seventh month. It's in the time of the rabbis that they transformed the first day of the seventh month into that time of year that we are familiar with. That they determined that Rosh Hashanah would be the new year, and that the new year would take on this spiritual significance. So this may be surprising to you, those on Zoom today and those watching this recording later on, that it's surprising that the rabbis would have the chutzpah to create a holiday that never existed before. And we always have to keep in mind, as we journey through through the Jewish year, that everything we do today Jewishly is thanks to the rabbis. Okay, the Torah was the foundation for the rabbinic endeavor, but it's the rabbis who transformed the basis, the foundation in the Torah into Jewish life as we know it today. So everything we do, even though most of it is based in the Torah, is expanded upon by the rabbis in order to make Judaism into this living system. So the rabbis understood that we need prayer as an opportunity to communicate with God, to feel God's presence in our life, especially since the temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago. That was the opportunity to experience God's presence in God's house and to see the worship service take place there as an opportunity to communicate with God. The rabbis also understood that people needed that kind of experience every day, not just 3 times a year on the 3 pilgrimage festivals. And so they created the system of prayer as we know it, morning, afternoon, and evening, and then further expanded that with prayers on the holidays, prayers on Shabbat, and spiritual connections that we make as we prepare ourselves for the new year. So the spiritual transformation, this idea of focusing on our actions, taking an account of what this past year has been like for us spiritually, not just the events that happened in our lives, but how we ourselves lived our lives spiritually this past year. What kind of spiritual encounters did we have? Did we have enough? What kind of person were we? Were we as good a person? Were we living up to our potential enough? Were we acting in a manner befitting the goals of social justice? Were we ethical and moral people? So the rabbis took all those ideas and focused them all into this high holiday season by first saying that we start to spiritually prepare ourselves by having this Selichot service. And for Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern European heritage, Selichot begins on the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, so that we have enough days that from that Saturday night until Rosh Hashanah to recite Selichot prayers every day before Rosh Hashanah begins. So in a traditional prayer book, there are Selichot prayers to be recited before the morning service begins during this time. So again, from the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah until Rosh Hashanah. And so, of course, what that means is you have to have enough days of preparation so that if Rosh Hashanah were to begin, let's say, on a Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday night, then Selichot is moved back a week, which is why Selichot was this past Saturday night, so that we have 10 days until Rosh Hashanah of Selichot prayers. If Rosh Hashanah is on a Wednesday night or later in the week, then Selichot is the previous Saturday night, so that you have Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, 4 nights at least of Selichot before Rosh Hashanah begins. So that's how the rabbis determined for the Ashkenazi Jewish community. Sephardic Jews actually recite Selichot from the first day of the month of Elul. So we are in the month of Elul now. The month before Rosh Hashanah is the month of Elul. And Sephardic Jews of Western European and Arab country heritage, recite Selichot the whole month of Elul before Rosh Hashanah. So these Selichot prayers incorporate the 13 attributes of God, which are recited at 3 different points in the Selichot service. And there are also piyutim, religious poems that are added to the service that focus on this sense of asking for forgiveness. So I want to share 2 of these piyutim with you, and just to get a sense of the nature of these prayers. Those of you who are on Zoom on Saturday night know the abridged kind of Selichot service that we did. This whole booklet, which we used to use, even when we used the booklet, I would lead the service and skip many of the pages. It's a lengthy service, and there are some synagogues, even some conservative synagogues, that will recite every page of the Selichot service. And there are some synagogues that have a formal choir in which the choir would recite most of the Selichot service. So it could be potentially a very lengthy service. Also, Selichot traditionally are recited at dawn. Every other day, not the Saturday night, but the other days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, the Selichot service is traditionally recited at dawn, just as soon as the day breaks. It's this kind of time of day in which you feel a little bit of solitude. People aren't fully awake yet. The world is just waking up around us. You hear the birds chirping outside. The rays of the sun are starting to peak in the sky, and depending on what the sky looks like, there could be pinkish colors, orange colors that you'll see in the sky. So it's a very beautiful, haunting kind of time that for the rabbis, it meant perhaps an opportunity for greater spirituality. So reciting them at dawn. There's a beautiful Yiddish story called If Not Higher, written by I.L. Peretz, which is a beautiful kind of Hasidic take on what Selichot is supposed to accomplish. So just look that up on your own. If Not Higher by I.L. Peretz. I'm sure because the story is more than 100 years old, it's free and available on the internet. It's a great short story to understand what Selichot is supposed to accomplish in ourselves. That it's not just going through the motions of asking for forgiveness. It's about transforming our lives so that we're doing for others. Okay, so the first piyut I wanted to share with you is called, based on the chorus, Lishmoa El Harina Ve'el Hatfilah, asking God to hear, Lishmoa, to the joy, Rina, Ve'el Hatfilah, the song of joy, and to the prayer. Okay, so the author of this piyut, probably from some time in the Middle Ages, has this in alphabetical order, from the second stanza to the end of the hymn, each line representing a different thought about how we're asking God to hear our plea and accept our prayer. So the first stanza, for example, B'motzei menucha ki damnucha techila. I'm not going to read through the entire piyut. I'll just give you a sense of what the author of this piyut is saying, why it's integral to the Selichot service. So I'll go with this English translation in this edition of the Selichot service, which is published by the Rabbinical Assembly. Translating a poem, the editor of this booklet decided to translate poetically. So the Sabbath has ended, b'motzei menucha, at the end of rest, which is the day of rest. Ki damnucha techila, night has come. Well, that's not what ki damnucha techila means, but hat oznecha mimarom, give your ear a listen from on high, yoshev tehillah, dwelling in glory. So this is translated, we approach you with earnest plea, O you who dwell in the heavens above. Lishmoa el harina ve'el hatfilah. Bend low and hear our hymn of praise. Right, so we're asking God to please listen to us as we ask for forgiveness. Okay, so there's beautiful tunes associated with this, and the next stanza, et yamin oz orara la'asot chayil, may you use your right arm, God, to do wonders. But tzedek ne'ekad, no, okay, but the right arm of Abraham wanted to do wonders, right? He was willing to listen to God. But tzedek ne'ekad, Isaac in justice was bound on the altar, v'nishchat timuro ayil, and instead a ram was offered in his place. Ginan nan gizo b'za'akam ba'od layil, shield his descendants praying this night. Lishmoa el harina el hatfilah. So just as you saved Isaac on the altar at the last second from Abraham's right arm, please save us from our no good and from the punishments that you could rightly cause to befall us. Please protect us instead. So it's a beautiful hymn about asking God to listen to our prayers and to forgive us. And then there's another interesting piyut in which we call upon, the hymn calls upon different characters from religious figures from the Bible who were answered in their time of stress and crisis. And just as God answered them, God should answer us. So there's a whole list of men who were answered, and there is an egalitarian version of this where women are incorporated into this, but this is, so let me read you off the list. Misha ana Avraham Avinu Bahar HaMoriah, Hu Ya'anenu. So Hu Ya'anenu is the cry. So the one who answered Abraham or responded to Abraham, our forefather, on Mount Moriah, he should answer us, right? So God answered Abraham's plea, God should answer us. Misha ana Yitzchak beno kishenakad al gav hamizbeach hu ya'anenu. The one who answered Isaac, his son, who was bound on the altar, he should answer us. Misha ana la Yaakov beveit El hu ya'anenu. He answered Jacob at Bethel, right? When Jacob was running away from Esau, Jacob had this dream at night of the angels going up and down the ladder. That's God answering his prayer. So God should answer us. Misha ana li Yosef beveit ha'asurim hu ya'anenu. Joseph was imprisoned on false charges of sexually advancing to Potiphar's wife, but he interpreted dreams in jail, and one of the people whose dreams were interpreted was restored to his position in Pharaoh's court, and then brought Joseph out to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. So that was all thanks to God. So God answered Joseph, he should answer us. Mishana la'avotenu al yam suf hu yanenu. God, just as God answered our ancestors' cries on the shores of the Red Sea, God should answer us. So we have Moses, we have Aaron, we have Pinchas, we have Joshua, we have Samuel, we have David and Solomon, we have Elijah, we have Elisha, we have Jonah, we have Chizkiyahu, King Chizkiyahu, we have Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the book of Daniel, who are in the lion's den. No, they were in the furnace. We have Daniel, who was in the lion's den. We have Mordechai and Esther and Shushan. We have Ezra in the exile. And we have the last line, Misha ana lechol hatzadikim v'chasidim v'timimim v'yesharim hu yanenu. Just as God answered the prayers of the tzadikim, the righteous ones, the Hasidim, the faithful ones, the Tamimim, the pure of heart, and the Yesharim, the honest ones, the upright ones, God should answer us. So these are just two examples of the many prayers in which we try to focus our hearts and our spirits this high holiday season. There are a number of Jewish websites out there that are focusing on this season. There are Jewish meditation websites, there are Jewish renewal websites, other websites like that have suggested readings and meditations and activities to do in these days before Rosh Hashanah that we could lose the focus by cooking meals for relatives and friends based on our own comfort level with COVID and what we're going to be doing this year, that we could be focusing on that and taking away our attention from the real purpose of the holiday, but the real intent is focusing on these prayers. Any thoughts or comments or questions about Selichot? So next Monday is Erev Rosh Hashanah, and it is Labor Day as well. I think I will still, I'll be ready for Rosh Hashanah, and this will help me also kind of focus my thoughts. I'm kind of last minute tweaking sermons for the holidays, and sometimes I too kind of lose a sense of spiritual focus on the high holidays. But I think we'll meet next Monday as well, and if there are people here, okay, that'll be great. And we'll focus on the Machzor a little bit for the Rosh Hashanah service, and foods of Rosh Hashanah as well. So we'll do that next Monday at this time at 11 o'clock. I think our Mondays throughout September, despite the Jewish holidays, they all begin on Monday night except for Yom Kippur. So we're okay with having class Mondays for the foreseeable future. Okay, so that's really all. Sometimes we'll go a full hour, sometimes not. So I wish everybody a good day today, and we'll see you all next week.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Yasher Koach.
Take care.
Okay.
Take
Have a good
care.
day.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.